Hi guys, I wanted to bring this report to you today because the Western media doesn't seem to be reporting what Russia is doing in response to the strikes that took place on Friday when they attacked Syria. So we've got the Western news report saying Russia revealed they are planning a major retaliation against US as World War III's fears rise. Putin's government has announced it is making preparations for a major response to the US after Donald Trump ordered fresh sanctions against Russia as tensions between the two world powers continues to dramatically deteriorate. Earlier this month, the US announced it had added 38 Russian entrepreneurs, senior officials, and companies to its sanctions list as part of an effort to crack down on the country's malign activity taking place across the globe. Now, the Kremlin has confirmed it's working on retaliatory measures to hit back at the Trump administration. They said, I will not announce anything, they're working on it. A firm response to the sanctions from Putin was already expected, and a bill outlining potential reactionary measures was presented to the Russian parliament earlier this week. It considered measures such as banning imports of US agriculture, alcohol, and tobacco products, as well as medical drugs. Now, that is basically what they're saying. They're saying that Russia is preparing some sort of response to the diplomats that were expelled worldwide and to the strikes that took place on Syria by the UK, US, and France. However, on the Russian side of things, they have already taken some actions which haven't been reported in the Western side of things. So after the attacks, or during the attacks, Moscow acted swiftly to boost its ties with Tehran, that's Iran, and beef up the Syrian military in reaction to the US, British, French surgical strike on Syria's chemical sites on Saturday. Russian and Iranian officials warned of consequences. They were already on the move. When Russian and Iranian officials warned of consequences, they were already on the move. Saturday night, while cruise missiles rained down on Syrian chemical sites, a Syrian Hezbollah force backed by Russian mercenaries renewed their push to cross the Euphrates River and snatch from US control the East Syrian Connaught gas and Al Umma oil fields. Just going to stop there for a second because obviously we know the importance of the Euphrates River and how that's indicated in the Bible. The armies of the East cross over the Euphrates River, and obviously Russia and Iran are part of the eastern side of the world, so you'd assume that they are the eastern armies, and they, during these strikes, pushed to cross the Euphrates and snatch the control from the US. So there were initial clashes with the US-backed Syrian Democratic Army. 2 days earlier, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei's close advisor Ali Akbar Velayati pointed the way when he told a news conference in Damascus, east of the Euphrates is a very important area. We hope big steps will be taken in order to liberate this area and expel the occupying Americans. While media reports abounded about Moscow's non-reprisal for the US-led attack, Moscow was quietly getting ready to confront the US and its allies. Heavy Russian strategic Tu-95 and Tu-22M bombers were deployed Thursday to air bases in Iran, thereby cutting their flying time to Syria and Iraq by at least 4 hours. I want to stop there because it doesn't make sense to me that Russia would move bombers to Iran to cut their flying time to Syria. They have bases in Syria, so there's no need for them to cut their flying time. Their flying time is zero already. This tells me that they are preparing themselves to defend Iran. It's also acting as a deterrent for attacking Iran, because if they do attack Iran and they hit Russian bombers or Russian forces are in Iran and respond or have the potential to respond, that will act as a deterrent to Israel, Saudi Arabia, and the United States. For how long that acts as a deterrent, I don't know, but at the moment, that's the way I see it. So that cuts their flying time, apparently, by at least 4 hours, and Russian freighters were transiting the Bosporus Straits Friday and Saturday in full sight of intelligence surveillance, laden with new military equipment for the Syrian army. US care in limiting its operation essentially to 3 sites, which is what they did on Friday, where the Bashar Assad's army was clandestinely making and stockpiling chemical weapons, served Moscow's purpose. So by America limiting its strikes and the UK and France following their lead, that actually worked in Moscow's advantage, or worked to Moscow's advantage. So Assad still retains substantial quantities of poison weapons even after these sites were struck by more than 100 missiles. He is still capable of using them again and will not be deterred from doing so if he thinks his regime is in danger. The US-led operation was beset by controversy between President Donald Trump and his Defense Secretary James Mattis. Had it been up to Mattis, it would not have been launched. The delay derived from the arguments against the strike put forward by the Defense Secretary and US Army chiefs led by General Joseph Dunford, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. They predicted that Russia and Iran would not take the missile assault lying down, and a single-dimensional strike would be the catalyst for a full-scale US war with Russia on Syrian soil. Mattis tried to put the brakes on the operation on Saturday morning by calling it a one-time shot, but then President Trump stated in a TV speech, "We are prepared to sustain this response until the Syrian regime stops its use of prohibited chemical agents." And just recently, Nikki Haley at the UN said that America remains locked and loaded if Assad uses chemical weapons again. This kind of puts the scenario on the table for chemical weapons being used again. And this particular scenario that we've seen this weekend escalating even further if it happens again. However, we don't know what the complete Russian response is yet, as they're still weighing responses, although they've taken action during the missile strikes in terms of bolstering their alliance with Iran, moving new military equipment into Syria. They're not lying down, and like the Western media is saying, we're waiting for a response from Russia. They're already responding. It's just that it's not with missiles as of yet, but they are strategically positioning themselves and pushing for control of the Euphrates River, which is key to biblical prophecy, because in the end times, when that final war is coming, the Euphrates River is dried up, whether that's by building a dam on the river and stopping the water from flowing down the river, allowing the eastern armies to pass across, or by some natural event, like an earthquake, for example, changing the course of the river, or a drought, for example, a serious drought, drying up the river, any one of those situations. But once the river is dry, the control of that area has already been pushed for during the strike. So it's all important. Biblical prophecy is unfolding before our eyes, and some of the reports aren't really picking up on it. But, you know, thank goodness I found this one, because it kind of gives you a real in-depth look at what the Russians and the Iranians have done so far. So where was I now? Okay, so Trump is perfectly capable of sacking Mattis with the same lack of ceremony with which he let Secretary of State Rex Tillerson go last month, but this won't resolve his differences with the generals regarding the scope of US military action in Syria. He will count on close support from Tillerson's successor at State, Mike Pompeo, and his new National Security Advisor, John Bolton, and we already know about John Bolton. And this is for widening the US military action in Syria into further strikes against the Assad regime. Now, John Bolton is obviously a hawk against Iran, is a hawk against Russia, would support war going to North Korea. He said that his views from the past have changed, but I really doubt that. He is, I would say, an America first person, but even more extreme. So to the point where it's just like he would bomb every single country if there was even the tiniest threat towards America, which is stupid because we live in a world where there's competition, economic, military, so you'd be threatened all the time. But with this guy here, he would happily go and bomb all those countries, plunging America into war and plunging the world into war. So whereas the Trump administration took care to keep the multilateral attack in Syria well defined to chemical targets, the Russians never promised to limit their response. They may well go for a major military success in Syria so as to obliterate the impact of the US-led assault. The Russian information machine was already at work before noon on Saturday when Colonel General Sergei Rodsky, can't say it, of the Russian military's general staff maintained that Syria's Russian-made air defense systems downed 71 out of the 103 missiles launched by the US and allies in Syria, with the help of monitoring by Russian air defense assets, but without the direct engagement of any Russian missiles. This was a message to Washington that a fresh wave of strikes in Syria would encounter direct Russian engagement. The Russian general also claimed that only minor damage was caused by the first wave. So with Donald Trump limiting the strikes to 3 chemical targets and that working to Russia's advantage, it also doesn't make sense to me to have a coalition of the US, UK and France with all the ships and all the things that they brought over there to target just 3 chemical sites using over 100 missiles to do so, and then claim that none of your missiles were intercepted. I do not believe that's true. 3 chemical sites. Okay, let's say they're massive chemical sites. You'd think that 5, maybe 6 missiles each would take down those sites. But we've had over 100 fired. Now maybe that's overkill, but in my opinion, I think it's the targets were not destroyed by the first set of missiles or the first volley of missiles, so they had to keep sending more. This means that those missiles were being intercepted, and that is against what the Western media is claiming, that no missiles are intercepted. But you can see from the large number, why fire that number if you hit your target? So Russian defense officials also threatened that Russia would resume discussions with Syria and other countries over the sale of modern S-300 air defense systems to protect against future US strikes. And the S-300 air defense system is one of the most advanced air defense systems in the world at the moment. Obviously, they're always developing more, but currently this is one of the best. And if they deploy defense systems like this in Syria and Iran and other places where America has an interest, then that could make striking those countries or those targets particularly difficult, especially if you don't want to involve or include any Russian involvement in response to what you're doing. So that's basically what I wanted to bring to you, just to alert you as to the fact that there has been retaliation being taken during and after these attacks on Syria. There is more response to come. As I said, they're still weighing their response to the missile attacks and to the diplomats that have been expelled worldwide. They could target, as I said, alcohol, tobacco, in terms of sanctions from the US. We know that they have their military positioned strategically across the world, ready to act on Putin's word. So we're just kind of waiting to see what really happens. Will chemical weapons be used again? Will there be a response that causes things to escalate? They're calling this attack on Syria a one-time thing, but I don't believe that's true. The unfortunate use of the mission accomplished in relation to George Bush, when he said mission accomplished in relation to Iraq, and the war is still going on even as we speak now, just gives you an idea as to where this potential one-time strike could lead. So you guys just keep yourselves aware of the situations going on around you. Even when things seem calm, pay attention, because as they're drawing your attentions to one place, something could be taking place somewhere else. Today is Sunday the 15th. It is 7:30, and today is the Day of the Sun in North Korea. As I mentioned before, they have 2 days of rest, which is the 16th and the 17th, and then the 18th is when is my biggest watch day, looking out for potential events happening. I really don't know what's going to happen, if anything's going to happen, when it's going to happen. The scenarios I have in mind, I've already mentioned, involve earthquake, blackout, volcano, tsunami, missiles, submarines, something of that nature. I have no idea if it's going to happen, but from the stuff that I've been looking at and interpreting, that's the kind of date that I've got from it. We'll see if anything happens. Pray to God nothing does, but if it does, at least there's some information out there as to what is really going on, and that it wasn't an accident, that it was planned in advance. So hopefully we can take action after that. You guys have a good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and God bless.